Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
The lecture series we're about to begin, it's a series of dealing with different phases of Jewish mysticism. The difference between this one and the other lecture is this one is a little bit introductory lecture, dealing with the subject of reincarnation and transmigration, and later we're going to have some type of juxtaposition between Buddhism, Sufism, the Islam teaching, Christianity and Judaism. So today we focus more on the subject of transmigration, or the way that the non-Jews, the Christians call it, the Catholic call it reincarnation. And I would like to present a question to you, which is a very painful question I ask my colleagues and friends when I go to different rabbinic convention and board of rabbis meeting. This question come up all the time. How come so many young people find a way to Tibet, to China, to India, to all these places that teaching Buddhism, Hinduism, so much with Eastern teaching, while Judaism is not only the source, but have the answer to those questions. So a good example of that is a very good colleague and friend of mine, Rabbi Ashlag in Israel, was teaching a class not long ago. And one of the people who attended class was a fellow that was a film producer, Israeli film producer, that went to Dalai Lama for like long time, about 2 years of production. Special Israeli documentary dealing with the Dalai Lama. So those who are familiar with that know that it was a special samsara, special code that they're giving to every student while they learn different methodology of self-regression or self-therapy with regression in their lives in order to for the people to follow the teaching of Buddhism. While that fellow noticed that he never received anything from the master. And once he asked that question, how come you don't give me anything, you don't give me any specific guidance, and he answered, the Dalai Lama answered, and he said, you're Jewish, you have Shema Israel, you have your faith, you don't need me. And that fellow was shocked, and he entered that Rabbi Ashlag class, stating that from the back door, he get the message that Judaism can give you the foundation and the answer to that. Yes, there are those who hold the school of thought that past the Shabtai Tzvi trauma in the Jewish world and past all these terrible things that happened to the Jewish people. It was a great fear of rabbis teaching this subject of mysticism and Kabbalah. Yet, the feeling that I have is some type of obligation to show the people, especially young people, what Judaism have to say about it, so hopefully they get an answer to those mind-boggling questions, such as what happened to a person after he or she passed. As you know, halakha, Jewish law, explains very clearly what happened to a person in a sense of Chevra Kadisha, burial process, etc. The person is no longer among the living. And then is a process of burial, the 7 stages of burial. But in the sense of the spiritual world, this is a question that people ask all the time, what really happened to the soul? What happened to a person? It's a very poignant question when it's come to an unprecedented situation, such as sudden accident, such as sudden situation, especially with people who lost their loved one in the sense of their child, God forbid, or in a very young age, or a sudden accident, etc. And in those moments, people always try to find in the faith group an answer to the question why and what's the purpose of life, or what happened to the soul after life. So let me begin this journey. It's a drop in the ocean, as we said, and I encourage you to ask me questions at the end and challenge whatever I said, but let's do it at the very end so we have enough time to ask questions. The first is the very famous Mishnah. Very famous Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, in the Ethics of the Fathers. The Mishnah said the story of Hillel and Shammai, page 547. Hillel and Shammai received a tradition from them. Hillel said, "Be among the disciples of Aaron, loving peace and pursuing peace, loving people and bringing them close to the Torah." So simple, literal interpretation of this Mishnah speaks about a great sage by name of Hillel and another sage by name of Shammai. According to our tradition, these sages live at the era of the 1st and the 2nd century, approximately 2,000 years ago. And the Talmud tells us that it was 5 different locations that Shammai and Hillel, the great sages, disagree over religious matters. The students have many hundreds of disagreements. So in a simple understanding, Hillel received a tradition, and Hillel said, "Be among the disciples of Aaron," which is a very well-known teaching. You see Hillel house all over the country. The idea of pursuing peace, bringing peace close to the Torah by teaching them the proper decorum of behavior between man and his fellow. Yet, the secret document, the rabbis dealing with the Jewish mysticism, dealing with those names and those entities in a little different way. The point of departure is the statement you see many times in the Torah. The Torah said when the ancestor passed, not just they died, the Torah used the word "vayasef el amav," which means he gathered to his people. They said about Jacob, he gathered to his people. They said about Moses that God buried him, etc. It's all kind of different statements that just put your ear and mind and head to a different location. You start asking questions, what does that mean? The Talmud relates to us a story that a fellow came to Shammai, a great sage, and asked him, "I want to study the entire Torah while I'm standing on one leg." Famous story, I assume that some of you heard. And Shammai said, "You can't do that. You have to be a serious student. If you want to study something, come to classes and learn." While he tried another one, Hillel, and Hillel said, "Yes, it's simple. Whatever you don't like others to do to you, don't do to others." Or the opposite way, don't do to others what you don't like others to do to you. The rest is commentary. So in a deep level, what Hillel tried to say is, Hillel have a better way of communication. So you want to learn about Judaism and you're sincere about learning about Judaism, so you should start with the point of departure of between man and man, like we read last week, the 5 commandments on the left side of the tablets, dealing with relationship between man and his fellow. If you do it properly, then you have a better way to get closer to understand Judaism. Does that mean that Shammai was wrong by rejecting him? No. Shammai has a different school of thought. Shammai was the most serious scholar and teacher who believed in a very serious learning, in the whole process of learning that can take years after years. So what happened between Shammai and Hillel, in that sense, it's not really a dispute. It's a different personality, it's a different way of observing what Judaism is all about. The Kabbalistic rabbis, I give you some names just for those who are a little deeper in that sense, is a book called Eshel LeAvraham, Chesed LeAvraham, and many others. They hold that it was a transmigration of souls. It means that Moses was a great leader. But if you read carefully the Torah, you see that in many locations he had issues of communication with people. He was very aggravated over a certain behavior. As much as he holds strong scholarship and leadership, it was a very serious distance between him and people. It's not that something was bad, but he was a very serious in the sense of learning. Aaron, however, the Torah described him as a people person. As an example to that is the very interesting description in the Torah of their passing. In short, the Torah described the passing of Moses as a passing of a great leader that people mourn over, while the Torah described the passing of Aaron. The Torah used the word the entire house of Israel, which means everyone mourn over the passing of Aaron. Why is that? Because Aaron has a certain way to bring peace and explaining the Torah in such a nice way to people, so he developed a very good relationship as a teacher-student, and as a result he increased the learning of Torah and understanding and love between the people. Following that way, which is the teaching of transmigration, that the soul never dies, the body, as we said earlier, we bury the body in the 7 stages of burial. While the soul never dies, if the soul never dies and it's always pure, then we have here a transmigration of souls, the rabbi said. And it's the reason why this Mishnah used this terminology. Because when they use the word Hillel and Shammai, it's actually Moses and Aaron transmigration of souls. Shammai is a great scholar, is a tremendous source of scholarship. Hillel, however, is a different personality. So here the Mishnah said, Hillel said, be among the disciples of Aaron, because I am the transmigration of souls of Aaron, of the soul of Aaron. And since in my past life I pursue that in a very hard way, I want that teaching to continue on and on and on. That's the way that Jewish mysticism takes. You call it Kabbalah, meaning receiving the tradition, explaining the concept of transmigration. In other words, when the Torah used the terminology of he is gathered to his people, it doesn't mean that he passed. Rashi, the famous commentator of 11th century, said Jacob never died, Moses never died, etc. It means, you can say literally that their teaching is still here, but you can say that there are transmigration of their souls in a different way throughout generation, which means their general soul, big soul, which we'll talk soon, never died. With that in mind, I want to digress for a second and explain a very deep Kabbalistic concept, which is a small private soul versus a neshama klalit, a general soul. In the Kabbalah literature, they explain to us that there are certain people who are granted in our language with a double soul, which means they have a soul as individual, as their quote-unquote private soul, but they have also a soul as a leader that it's expressed is in a sense of responsibility of leadership that involve everybody else. In that sense, the ancestors have a neshama klalit, a general soul, and therefore they hold responsibility in certain actions and certain things that happen, and sometimes that part, that spark, need to, in a way, come back and repair. It's a very beautiful, famous, the Holy Or HaChaim, the holy great rabbi at the portion of Vayechi, very close to the book of Genesis, who explained to us a very deep Kabbalistic concept, 16th century Ari, who speak about the sparks of souls, which means that the soul never die in a sense that every single day there is different sparks of the soul that live throughout a person's life, and is an opportunity for those sparks to do tikkun olam, to be repaired. And then at the end of a person's life, it's a collection of all those sparks, and in our language is a scale if the soul needs to come back or it's already in a sense of completion of their mission in life. With that in mind, we can begin grasping the concept of the biblical text of karet. For example, when the Bible in a sense of punishment or even severe punishment. The Torah said, if you committed such a sin, that soul shall be cut off. And you ask yourself, what does that mean? There's no earthly court that judging that person. So what happened to that soul? And the rabbis go at length to explain that we have a heavenly court and we have the afterlife, etc., which we'll talk in the future. And it means that that soul, in our simple language, is like you have in your computer a wires that connected between the computer and the modem, and that part of those wire cut. It's not connected anymore, and it needs to have a long process of repairing in order to put those pieces together and we'll be able to connect. So for us to go further with all the concept of what happened after a person's passed away, afterlife, the transmigration versus reincarnation in Christianity, I would like to take you to a journey, first and foremost in the Bible. Book of Kings, second book of Kings, chapter 4, which also the Haftarah of the portion of Vayera. It's page 883. I'm not going to read the entire chapter, we don't have enough time for that, but I'll go in the sense of the abbreviation of the text, and you're welcome to read it later and ask me questions. The text speaks here about a woman among the wife of the prophets, the Obadiah. She cried out to Elisha, one of the godly prophets, and she said, it's a crisis, my husband died, and I'm in trouble, and he helped her. The text speaks about some type of miracle that brought a vessel and another vessel, and it was oil, and eventually she was able to pay her debt and have enough oil to pay all those collectors. But then the text speaks about some type of resurrection of dead. And this is something that we need to go a little deeper. They said here that page 885, which is chapter 4. This woman said to her husband, sentence 9, behold, there is a godly person that passed by our home all the time, and we should dedicate a location, attic, and place a bed and chair and lamp, so whenever he passed by, he can stay here. And she and her husband was extremely nice to Elisha. They brought him a place to stay, a place to rest, etc. Elisha felt responsible in the sense of he wants to express his gratitude to her. So he said, is anything I can do for you? She said, no, I don't need anything. So he asked his servant Gehazi, and he said, is anything this woman needs? And Gehazi said to him in sentence 14, actually she has no child and her husband is old. Meaning this is a text that not millions but billions of people believe. Christians, Catholic, many others believe in that text. It's the second book of Kings by them. So it's a text that studied by many hundreds of millions of people. So what is the Jewish perspective? What happened here? So he said to her, summon her. So he summoned her, and she stood in a doorway. Elisha said, guess what? At this season next year, you'll be embracing a son. So in simple language, you can say that Elisha was a prophet, and he prophesied that that's what's going to happen at this time. But I wish that it's as simple as that, because we go further with the story, with the narrative, and she said to him, do not, my master or man of God, do not disappoint my maidservant. What do you mean you don't disappoint? She's not doubting. The rabbis tells us, I just give you the advanced interpretation. The Ralbag and the other rabbis said she's not doubting his blessing. She's not even doubting his prophecy. But in a deep level, she wants to know, since she was a childless most of her lives, and her husband is old, she believed that she will have a child, but she has some type of feeling that since I reach a point in my life that I do not have a child, it may be a disappointment. So what she asks here, the rabbis tells us, it's not only to have the blessing of a child, but to have a wealthy child that survived in many years. That's the rabbi's interpretation of her saying, do not, my master or man of God, do not disappoint your maidservant. She is not doubting the holy man Elisha's blessing. She just wants to make sure that there is no problem with that child. So the woman conceived and bore a son at the season of next year, as the Elisha told her. Beautiful. The boy grew up, and it happened one day, he went out to his father to the repair of the field, and he said to his father, my head, my head. So his father said to the attendant, carry him to his mother, which means all of a sudden this little boy have issues. He carried him and brought him to his mother, so he sat on her lap until noon, and then he died. So you see the text here dealing with a very serious issue, which is, she is childless, she doesn't bother to have children. Elisha, in a sense, imposed upon her a child. He blessed her with a child. She asked him not to be disappointed, and he said, fine. Then the child born and is dead. So she went up and laid him on a bed of Elisha, of man of God, shut the door upon him and left. She then called her husband and said, please send me one of the attendants to one of the donkeys, and she will hurry to bring the man of God and return. So remember, this is not a 5 minutes resuscitation. It's an hour process in those days, right? You have to have the donkey, you have to have the attendants, you have to run there to another location to call Elisha, to have him come back, and the boy is lying on his bed. So he went, and sat at the donkey, and it's a long story. He went to Mount Carmel. At least you may say that it's a couple of hours while the boy is dead. So it's not a simple process of resuscitation of a baby or a child, right? When Elisha, the man of God, saw her, and after he said to Gehazi, his attendant, behold, this is the Shunammite woman. Now please, run toward her and say to her, it is well with you, it is well with you, husband, what's going on? So she said, she stood before him, she grasped his legs, and Gehazi tried to push her away, and Elisha said, don't do that, leave her alone, she's bitter. And she said, did I request the son of my master? Did I not say, do not mislead me? So he said to Gehazi, gird your loins, take my staff in your hand and go. And don't stop any place, just go. So he went, page 887, sentence 30. The lad's mother said, I swear as Hashem leads, as I swear as you lead, I will not leave you. So he arose and went after her. Gehazi went ahead of them and placed the staff in the lad's face. But there was no sound, nothing was heard. And he returned to Elisha and he told him, saying, the lad is not awake. In other words, it's a attempt to resuscitate the baby, and nothing happened. So again, we have to say that it's a long period of time before something happened. Elisha came into the house, and behold, the lad was dead, laid out on his bed. He entered and shut the door behind them both, and he prayed to Hashem. Then he went up and lay upon the boy, placing his mouth upon his mouth, his eyes upon his eyes, and his palm upon his palm. He stretched himself out to cover him, and warmed the flesh of the boy. He would draw and walk through the house, once this day and once this way and that way. And then he went up and stretched himself over him. The lad sneezed 7 times, and the lad opened his eyes. Elisha called Gehazi and said, summon this Shunammite woman. The Shunammite head and came and said, pick up your son. She came and fell upon his feet, bowed down the ground, and she picked up the son and left. Famous Haftarah of Vayera. So the big question here, what happened to Elisha? What happened in this narrative? So if you look at the regular way of traditional interpretation of the text, you said this is one of the biblical narratives speaking about a man of God that performed miracles, which is a prophet, is a man of God, and it's a dead child, and he performed a miracle and he resuscitated the child and make him a living being. The Kabbalistic rabbis go to say in a much deeper level. The rabbi said that it is not Elisha who created that, it's the Almighty God. Which means it is a very righteous couple, and there is a soul that need to transmigrate to them. And therefore that soul transmigrate to them for a certain period of time. And then that soul completed its mission. Then they call upon Elisha. He prayed to God to bring another soul that needs to be transmigrated. He penetrates in his prayer, in a sense, in the throne of glory to God to have it. And this is the second time a spark or a different soul that attend to a body of that boy. Very deep concept. But now we grasp the point of the transmigration in Judaism. If you look at the ArtScroll Sidurim, you see at nighttime before Shema, there is a statement. I forgive everyone that hurt my feeling today. Either that person in this transmigration or different transmigration. And then in the morning, the first thing we're doing when we wake up is said, thank you, Lord God, for return my soul. So what's happening here? Judaism said that every single day when a person is in a state of sleeping, he is quote unquote partially dead. Which means when a person naturally goes to sleep, you don't know if you wake up, and what condition you wake up, and how things happen. And there are sparks, they already said, the sparks of souls that bring you the mission for that day. If you completed the mission properly, it's great. If not, there are some issues. And as we said earlier, those sparks are collected at the end of a person's life. And then there is some situations that need another chance. In that sense, there is a very fascinating blessing which we said in a daily basis, and not always we pay attention to that. The blessing said right after, for example, drinking water. We said, blessed are you God, Master of the universe, Borei nefashot rabot, who bringing many souls, v'chesronan, and those souls who have deficiencies, nefesh kol chai, to all these different souls. Blessed are you God, who is an eternally living God. It means, the rabbi said, that in the apple or fish or whatever you eat, there is a sparks of souls there. And you have a chance by saying the grace before eating to bring those sparks to their repair states, which means those sparks of souls committed all kind of sins in the past life, and the Almighty give a chance to that soul to return, to that spark of the soul. And upon saying the blessing properly, you're helping that soul to return and rest in peace. So when you say that blessing, Borei nefashot rabot, that God created many souls and deficiency souls, you meant to say, the rabbi said, that it is a chance for a person to help repairing souls. Back to our subject, those situations in the Bible, like the story of Elisha and Gehazi and that Shunammite woman and her husband, the text speaks about very righteous couple. As you know, in the Bible, it's always childless situation. Abraham and Sarah, and Isaac and Rebekah, and Rachel and Hannah, and so many stories of childless parents which express righteousness, people who are suffering. And they reach a point that they are very high level of piety. They receive a special gift from God of special child, like, for example, Hannah received the great first prophet Samuel. And when they receive that special gift, it's conditional, it's in a special mission, in a certain time frame, is a certain purpose. With that in mind, that mother, that Shunammite, asked Elisha, do not disappoint me because I really want a regular child of a regular life, like a regular person. And what turns to happen is she raised, in our language, 2 different transmigration of souls. Another example to that is the story of Kafakela. Kafakela is a description that Christianity took very heavily from Judaism. It is the description of a Gehinnom, or in their language, hell, which it means that there is an afterlife and is a certain time of unpeaceful states of the soul. In Christianity, they call it reincarnation, which is endless process of repairing the souls. In Judaism, most of the rabbis agree in theoretical Kabbalah that there is a limitations. Yes, there are those who hold that it's many, many times, but most of the rabbis hold that it's limited to certain times. Many hold that it's just one time, and then it's come out in the form of either animals or other forms, like we mentioned earlier, spark with the fruits or fish. But the story of Kafakela speaks about situation of a sinner that as a result of his or her sin doesn't find the proper peace after the passing. With that in mind, the soul is wandering. The soul is never have the state of peace. A good example to that is the story of Cain in the Bible. The Torah tells us that after Cain committed the first crime of killing his brother Abel, it was not a situation of God just let him have it. Killing Cain, goodbye. He's dead, he killed his brother, and goodbye, and let heaven punish him. God go, in our sense, much further. Wants to give a world a lesson of life. It's the beginning of Genesis. Remember, billions of people believe in that. What God did to Cain, everyone knows, right? He put a sign on his head, so he's going to a jungle now, living like the animals. But the animals cannot do any harm to him because he has this sign. However, from now on, he has a wandering life. He needs to go from one place to another. He has no peace. So the Kabbalah literature call it Kafakela, which means the soul is not resting in peace. The soul is a wandering soul. And is a huge suffering for the soul to wander from one location to another without having any type of peace. Well, with that in mind, we understand, for example, the concept of saying Kaddish, or saying mourner's Kaddish, or studying. Because what we are saying is that at the end of burial, for sure it's not the end of the story. It's the end of the story in a sense of burying the body. But the spirit, the soul, since it's still a living spirit, there is a process. And the rabbis tell us that that process not exceeded more than 11 months. If, for sure, it's not someone that is in a heavy crime, we all know that a guy like Mengele, there is no forgiveness, But if you talk about average soul, committed some type of sins, there is a process of 11 months that the soul is not really resting in peace. There is 11 months that we need to, in our language, help the soul rest in peace. Which means in Judaism, we never said that is a final death to a person. We said that is a process of body and soul, which is the body live fragilely for certain times, short, brief time, while carry soul. But that body, while they're carrying the soul, with that brief time in the person's life, let's say 80 or 100 or 120 years or whatever it is, it's a short trial, short time, and whenever it's over, it's not over. Which is, it's over in a sense of this life mission, this trial. But it's not over in a sense that there's a certain period of time before the soul be able to fully rest in peace. Another good example to that, I just give it as an abbreviation. The Talmud tells us a story about a fellow that ran away from his wife. Does that sound good? It was a fellow that is living with a very difficult wife, and it was Erev Rosh Hashanah, and she gave him a very hard time. Just give you the abbreviation of that famous Talmudic text. So the Talmud said that he just ran out, and she tried to chase him, so he ends up where? In a cemetery. So she couldn't find him, and it was the eve of Rosh Hashanah, so that fellow slept in a cemetery at Rosh Hashanah night. So, sleeping in a cemetery, I assume it's not a great pleasure, but while he was sleeping, the Talmud said, at the middle of the night, and it's not my making up stories, you can read it there, he heard a voice, a female voice, coming out of the cemetery. And he heard a voice talking to another voice, both female voices, saying, you travel around the world, what did you see? And the other voice said, the field is going to take turn, things going to change, and it's going to be a so-and-so and so certain way of the upcoming year. Well, the fellow heard that. Day after Yom Tov, guess what he did? He sold his field. He did not planted any seed, and just overnight he became very wealthy. So his wife was wondering what's happening, and he said nothing. Fine. The year after, guess what the guy did by himself? Erev Rosh Hashanah, he decided to go back to the cemetery and go and sleep again. And lo and behold, the second year, guess what happened? He heard again these two souls. One said, you know, I'm not really resting in peace. The reason I'm wandering soul, it's because the machzelet is like some type of, my mother just put me there. It's a side of the cemetery. I don't have a normal burial plot. And she just covered my body with stalks, with some hay, some cover it. And I'm still wandering because I didn't have a full normal burial. So the other soul said to her, okay, so what did you heard? So she again gave the prediction of the year, what's going to happen in the agricultural world, and the fellow heard that, and the Talmud goes to say that he planted his seed on time, and he knew exactly when it's going to be ice and rain and snow, and accordingly he planted his year, and again it was an extremely successful year, and he became very wealthy. Well, he has a great wife. She tried pushing him, and she said, look, you have to tell me the truth. This is not something, I don't think that you are so talented to know how things going to happen. You have to tell me the truth. How in the world you make things like that happen? And she was very pushy, and she knew he has short fuses. So eventually she get out of him the truth. He told her, you know, I ran away from you last year. I was sleeping in the cemetery. I heard those voices, etc. I told her the whole story. Fine. Several months passed by, and the Talmud said that this lady met, meaning his wife, met the mother of the deceased, the mother of the lady that was talking to the other one. And somehow they get in fight, and when she get hot, she said to her in a very strong language, she said, I know how you bury your daughter. You didn't bury her like everybody else in a cemetery. You just put something over her grave and you just bury her, you know, in the disgrace. I know about it. Fine. Talmud said, several months passed, and that fellow went back to the cemetery, eve of Rosh Hashanah. And he tried to sleep, tried to hear voices, and yes, again he heard voices. So he heard one voice said to the other, "So, what's going to happen this year?" And that voice said, "I can't tell you because there is somebody else listening to our conversation." And the rabbis go at length to say that that conversation between his wife and her mother was heard by another fellow who passed away during that time. And that soul, after passing, informed the other soul that there is somebody at a cemetery hearing the conversation. And then she said, "I can't speak anymore." Now, without getting too involved with understanding that Talmud, we learn several things. For example, we learn the whole concept of burial, the proper burial, how important is the burial to people. Judaism, for example, forbids us to bury two enemies, one next to another. So if you ask yourself, is nothing happened after a person's past, why do you care if this person buried to the someone who didn't like during his lifetime? Or this story with the machzelet, with the cover over the why do we care about the plot and what is written and what we said and how long and what's the eulogy and what's the process, etc. It shows us that this departure of the soul from the body is a long process of suffering for the soul. In our language, in our sense, the great Rabbi Tukoczynski wrote in the book called Gesher HaChaim, The Bridge of Life, and he explained it beautifully, that during these 7 stages of passing, the soul is not really resting in peace. The soul is still here. It's like a candle that's flickering, that it's not really there. And because of that, the soul is wandering. It's not really in peace. We said in Judaism you have to bury quick. You have to do it. You have to be truthful with your eulogy, which is very rare in this country. You have to bury properly, etc., etc. Because yes, the spirit, the soul, care very much of what's happening around. It's not like other cultures that said the minute the person passed away, it's over. In Judaism, we said that if you leave the body open, like you have it in some churches, etc., it's a desecration of the sanctity of the person. Judaism said that in that sense, the process of transmigration taking place, which means since the soul have a certain time period and it's a completion of that mission, then you have to expedite that process, which is to assuage the pain, to create a situation that the person can be buried not only respectfully but quickly, so the soul be able to rest in peace. Very famous story, I assume that some of you who are involved with the knowing Hasidic world, very famous story about the great Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement. The story goes that one morning after the morning prayer, he asked the mohel, the guy who's doing circumcision, to join him, and he asked another 8 men to take part of this journey, and he said, "Prepare the wagon, and we're going out for a special mission." And no one has a clue what the rabbi is planning to do and how, and they start traveling, and the Baal Shem Tov show the driver of the wagon, whatever you call it, right, left, left, right, and they end up in Podola, in one of the small villages, and they knock the door, the fellow opened the door, and lo and behold, he was so happy to see them, because guess what? He has a baby, and the baby is 8 days old, and they need the mohel to do the bris. And Baal Shem Tov, in his very special high ability as a great mystic and a great Kabbalistic rabbi, he in a way knew about it. So for sure, they brought the baby, they did the bris, they did the circumcision, and right after that big ceremony, it's a Hasidim, they brought out the schnapps, they start drinking, they did l'chaim, they celebrated, they sing a song, they make a sehuda. It was a very beautiful celebration. And for sure, they named the baby, they asked the Baal Shem Tov, and the Baal Shem Tov asked the parents, and everybody agreed that the baby name should be Yosef. So they have this huge simcha, and right before they're about to departure, the mother took back the baby to nurse the baby, and minutes 2, 3, 5, she's screaming. What happened? The baby passed. So again, everything turned around, and now they need to bury the baby, and they need to say Kaddish, and everything turned around to a great state of agony. And after they left the house, heartbreaking, the Hasidim, the followers, asked the great Baal Shem Tov, what happened here? We thought we understand, but we do not understand. The great righteous Baal Shem Tov said to them, look, I can share with you what I can share with you. I have a sense, I have a feeling, I get some type of inspiration. It was a great rabbi, the author, the writer of the Code of Jewish Law, the Shulchan Aruch. His name is Rabbi Yosef Karo. And the legend goes that Rabbi Yosef Karo, because of most probably some type of hepatitis infection, he was not able to be circumcised on time. Which means when he was born, it took some times before they were able to do the bris. As you know, by halacha, we can do it up to a year. So sometimes if the baby is yellow and there is a high level of hepatitis infections involved, you have to wait a certain time. So Rabbi Karo was circumcised. The bris took place much later than he should, in the sense of timing. It wasn't 8 days old. He is the author of the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law, was a great sage. His soul came to heaven in our language, but in a sense need to transmigrate because of the idea of being circumcised properly at the 8 days old. These righteous parents merit to have this privilege, and the baby transmigrate toward these parents, and we are able to do this mitzvah. And right after the circumcision, he fulfilled his mission, the soul is gone, it's done, he did his job, and that's it. You may ask me a question now, Baal Shem Tov said. Why the parents suffering? Why the mother suffer? Why the father suffer? Why things happen in such a way? I'm not going to tell you because I myself do not have a full answer for all those questions. But we believe that God is good, and God is God of judgment, and God is God of mercy. So we believe that God is good. But here you grasp the idea of a Kabbalah thinking or Kabbalah literature that speaks about transmigration of soul. In Kabbalah writings in Hebrew language, we use the word Gilgul for transmigration. Gilgul in Hebrew meaning recycling. It's like mitgalgel, like galgal, like wheel. It's a recycling of a soul. So God's give a gift and God take away a gift, and that's the way things happen. Another good example I would like to share with you is, again, it's in Hebrew, there's no translation, I try to do my very best. It's a book called Shara Gilgulim. This book is by the son of Rabbi Chaim Vital, who is the student of the Ari. He was a great rabbi in Egypt, Kabbalist, expert in exorcism. And he speaks about situation that happened in Egypt. The year, it's the Hataf Kaf Vav, which is 5,426. So if you make the account, we're speaking about 300 years ago. And it was the Thursday, the 26th day of Tammuz. And this letter from this great sage in Egypt described, his name is Shmuel Vital, the son of Rabbi Chaim Vital. And he described a situation with Esther, the daughter of Rabbi Yehuda Weiser, a fellow that lived in Egypt, that she was involved in an accident. It's a very young teenager. And everybody pushed me, he said, to go and visit her because there is a dibuk. Dibuk, it's basically a soul that come to the body of a person, the soul of the departure, and do not leave the person. So you hear all kind of unexpected voices and all kind of reaction. So he said, I saw her and I start making those prayers, and I communicated with that dibuk. And I tried very hard, and it wasn't proper communication, which means it wasn't the way that I want to. So I said I'm leaving, and that soul begged me to help getting out of the body. So I asked questions, and they explain the relationship between that girl and that soul in a past life, etc., etc. They go to the whole details of the what happened and why it happens. And eventually he took another 9 men that expert in this exorcism, and they make a long list of prayers mentioned here, and make a special vow, a special oath upon the soul, and ask the soul not only to leave immediately, but not to create any damage to that young girl, to her family, to anybody who's standing there, and nobody around. And they make even an oath that not return here to Egypt again, but go out to Gehinnom to be healed. And they put the oath, repeated 3 times, 10 people was there, etc., etc. And they asked the soul to give a special sign upon the departure, to say the word Aleichem Shalom, the same way as to say Shalom Aleichem when you're greeting person. The person who require, the dibuk, required to say Aleichem Shalom, meaning I'm out. And after they make is a long list of prayer that those people put tears and prayers and vow to give the charity, etc., etc. It was a huge sounds, screaming, and from the toes, the left leg, the left toes, the soul put out, said Aleichem Shalom 3 times, and we said Lech LeShalom, go in peace 3 times, and right after that, he says, it was like something in the window, like it sounds like breaking something in the window, and that the girl sat, she opened her eyes, she looked around, she said, what's going on, who are these people? And he ended up by said, V'nashka yadi v'achla b'shata, in those Sephardic rabbis, they kissed the rabbi's hand, but anyway, she kissed and she sat and she ate and drank and she had no clue what's involved. And he ended up this letter by saying, V'ze na'asa al yadi, Rabbi Shmuel Vital claimed that he was the one who in charge of that event, the Thursday, the 26th of Tammuz, in Egypt. And he ended up by saying, V'katabti kol ze, the reason I put this in writing, למזכרת לבאים אחרינו, to be some type of sign for the future generation, למען ידעו, that everyone should know, כי יש אלוקים בישראל, that there is an almighty God of judgment among Israel. So here is another example of the concept of dibuk, which we're not involved with this session, but it's a concept of some type of transmigration of soul for certain other soul, for certain purpose, for certain time, and for specific reasons. So in short, let's wrap up whatever we studied so far, because we plan to study much more, but time not allow. We basically begin the subject of ending of life, which is a process of the body and the soul. The Torah tells us at the beginning of book of Genesis that God, when he created Adam, he formulated his body from dust, and he blew in his nostrils the soul of life, and he making a living being. And then the Torah tells us when the 2 sons of Aaron died, it was told the nostrils that God took back in that process their lives. So in our understanding, it's a process of the soul, the transmigration of souls, come to a body for certain mission, for certain time, and every single person has his or her own mission. That mission can be a days, can be 100 years of life. Certain mission, when is a completion upon that mission, then is no need for that soul to be anymore among the living. As we said many times, this is a long subject. We just begins it, and in the future, the next one, we're going to speak about Buddhism, the Buddhist belief, the Sufis believe, the Mu'tazila, the teaching of very much of the great scholars of the Sufism, and we try to juxtapose what we learn about Judaism to see what really connected to Judaism and what not. This is a time for questions, so you can turn off all these different vehicles and people can ask me questions.